I watched in horror as the crystal champagne glass shattered against the marble floor. Blood trickled down my cheek as 300 wedding guests gasped in silence. But what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about wealth, power, and justice. This is my story. Before I tell you how one slap at a billionaire's wedding turned my entire world upside down, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this story ends. Now, let me take you back to that fateful Saturday morning. My name is Olivia, and I'm nobody special. At least, that's what I used to think. I run a small flower shop downtown, the kind of place where people come for simple bouquets and funeral arrangements. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, just honest work that barely pays the bills. That Tuesday morning started like any other. I was arranging daisies in the front window when my phone rang. The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, and completely unexpected. Ms. Olivia, this is Margaret from Elite Events. We have an urgent request for a wedding this Saturday. The bride specifically asked for your services. I nearly dropped the phone. Elite Events? They handled million-dollar weddings for celebrities and billionaires. Why would they want me? I think there's been a mistake, I said, still stunned. No mistake. The bride, Catherine Wellington, saw your work at the Miller anniversary party last month. She wants you to handle all the floral arrangements for her wedding to Alexander Morrison. The budget is $50,000. $50,000. That was more than I made in 6 months. I said yes before I could think twice. The next few days flew by in a blur of ordering flowers, designing arrangements, and trying not to panic. Alexander Morrison was one of the richest men in the country. His wedding would be covered by every gossip magazine and social media platform. One mistake could ruin my reputation forever. But I also saw it as my big break. Maybe, just maybe, this could change everything for me and my daughter, Sophie. Saturday morning arrived with perfect weather. The Morrison estate was like something out of a fairy tale. Rolling hills, perfectly manicured gardens, and a mansion that looked like it belonged in a movie. I'd never seen anything like it. I arrived at dawn with my van full of flowers. The wedding planners directed me to the back entrance, the servants' entrance, they called it. I didn't mind. I was used to being invisible. The main hall was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers hung from a ceiling painted with cherubs and gold leaf. The marble floors were so polished I could see my reflection, and there, waiting for my flowers, were dozens of tables set with china that probably cost more than my car. I got to work immediately, transforming the space with white roses, peonies, and baby's breath. Each arrangement had to be perfect. This was my chance to prove I belonged in this world, even if just for one day. That's when I met her. Catherine Wellington swept into the room like she owned it, which in a few hours she basically would. Tall, blonde, and beautiful in the way that money can buy. Her dress probably cost more than my monthly rent. She looked at my work with the expression of someone examining a bug. "These roses are smaller than I expected," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. "They're the largest grade available," I replied politely. "They'll look beautiful in the photos." She picked up one of my arrangements, examined it like it was defective, and set it down with a dismissive sigh. "I suppose they'll have to do. Just try to stay out of the way during the ceremony. The guests shouldn't be reminded that we had to hire local help." Local help. The word stung, but I kept my smile fixed in place. "Of course, ma'am. I'll be invisible." She walked away without another word, her heels clicking on the marble floor like a countdown timer. I spent the rest of the morning finishing the arrangements and trying to shake off the encounter. I'd dealt with difficult clients before. This was just another job. But then I met Alexander. I was adjusting the altar arrangements when a quiet voice behind me said, "They're beautiful." I turned to find a man in his 30s, tall and lean, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He wasn't dressed like the other wealthy guests, just a simple suit that looked expensive but understated. "Thank you," I said, unsure who he was. "I'm Alexander," he said, extending his hand. "The nervous groom?" My heart nearly stopped. This was the billionaire everyone was talking about? He seemed so normal. I'm Olivia, I managed. I hope everything meets your expectations. It's perfect, he said, and I could tell he meant it. Thank you for making this day special. There was something familiar about him, something that nagged at the back of my mind, but before I could place it, Catherine appeared at his side. Alexander, darling, you shouldn't be bothering the help, she said, linking her arm through his. We have guests to greet. He looked like he wanted to say something, but she was already pulling him away. He glanced back at me once, and I saw something in his eyes. Recognition? Confusion? I couldn't tell. The ceremony began at 3 o'clock. I watched from the back, hidden behind a pillar, as 300 of the country's most powerful people took their seats. The music started and Catherine made her entrance, looking like a princess in her designer gown. It should have been magical. It was magical, but something felt off. Alexander looked uncomfortable, distracted. During the vows, his eyes kept drifting to the crowd, as if he was looking for someone. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the applause was polite but not enthusiastic. Even I could feel the tension in the room. The reception was held in the garden, under a canopy of lights that turned the evening into something out of a dream. I stayed busy, refreshing arrangements and trying to remain invisible as Catherine had requested. But invisibility, I was about to learn, was impossible when you're carrying a heavy vase of water near a bride in a white dress. It happened so fast. One moment I was carefully carrying a crystal vase to replace some wilted flowers. The next, I was stumbling over a chair leg I hadn't seen. The vase tilted, and water splashed onto the marble floor. None of it hit Catherine. Not a drop. But she spun around like I'd thrown acid at her. "What do you think you're doing?" she shrieked, loud enough for half the reception to hear. "I'm so sorry," I said, immediately kneeling to clean up the water. "I didn't see the chair, it was an accident." But Catherine wasn't listening. She was looking at the growing circle of guests who had turned to watch our confrontation. The humiliation I was about to endure wasn't just about spilled water. It was about showing everyone exactly where I stood in her world. "Accident?" she repeated, her voice dripping with disdain. "You nearly ruined my dress. Do you have any idea how much this cost?" "I'm truly sorry," I said again, still on my knees, wiping up water with my own handkerchief. "Please let me—" "Get up," she snapped. "Look at me when I'm talking to you." I stood slowly, my cheeks burning with shame. Around us, the conversations had stopped. Everyone was staring. Some looked entertained, like they were watching a show. Others looked uncomfortable but didn't dare interfere. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Catherine continued, her voice carrying across the garden. "This is what happens when you hire people who don't belong here. You should have stayed in your little flower shop where you can't embarrass decent people." My hands were shaking, but I kept my voice steady. "I understand you're upset. I'll replace any arrangements that were damaged and clean up immediately." "You'll do more than that," she said, stepping closer. "You'll remember your place. You're here to serve, not to mingle with your betters. Some of us were born to this world, and others—" She looked me up and down with disgust. "Others are just pretending." I felt tears threatening, but I refused to give her the satisfaction. "I'm just trying to do my job, ma'am." "Your job is to be invisible," she hissed. "But clearly that's too much to ask from someone like you." Someone like me. The words hit harder than I expected. I thought about my daughter Sophie, waiting at home for me to tell her about the fancy wedding. I thought about my little flower shop and how proud I'd been to be chosen for this job. I thought about all the times I'd been looked down on for not having money, not having connections, not belonging. But I also thought about dignity, about the right to be treated like a human being, regardless of how much money you have in your bank account. "I may not have been born into wealth," I said quietly, "but I work hard. I treat people with respect, and I take pride in what I do. I'm sorry about the water, but I won't apologize for who I am." The crowd was dead silent now. Even the music had stopped. Catherine's face turned red with fury. "How dare you?" she whispered. "How dare you speak to me like that? Catherine!" Alexander's voice cut through the tension. He was walking toward us, his face a mask of concern. What's going on here? This woman, Catherine said, pointing at me like I was something dirty, nearly ruined my dress and then had the audacity to lecture me about respect. She needs to learn her place. Alexander looked at me, and again I saw that flicker of recognition in his eyes. I'm sure it was just an accident, he said calmly. Accident or not, Catherine snapped, she needs to understand that there are consequences for embarrassing me in front of our guests. The crowd pressed closer, sensing drama. I felt trapped, humiliated, and completely alone. These people with their designer clothes and inherited wealth were treating me like entertainment, like I was something to be laughed at and dismissed. Please, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I just want to finish my work and go home. Oh, you want to go home? Catherine's voice was sharp with malice. Well, let me help you with that. That's when she raised her hand. I saw it coming, but couldn't believe it was happening. In front of 300 people at her own wedding, Catherine Wellington Morrison brought her hand across my face with enough force to send me stumbling backward. The slap echoed across the garden like a gunshot. My cheek exploded in pain. I tasted blood where my teeth had cut my lip. The champagne glass I'd been holding fell from my numb fingers and shattered on the marble floor. The silence was deafening. 300 people stared at me, at the blood trickling down my chin, at the tears I could no longer hold back. Some looked shocked, others looked satisfied, as if justice had been served. Catherine stood over me, breathing hard, her hands still raised. Maybe now you'll remember your place, she said. I wanted to run. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to wake up from this nightmare and find myself back in my little flower shop, arranging simple bouquets for people who treated me like a human being. But then Alexander spoke. Stop. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence like a blade. He stepped forward, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked truly angry. That's enough, he said, his eyes fixed on Catherine. Alexander, she said, her voice suddenly uncertain. She embarrassed us. She needed to be taught a lesson. The only person who's been embarrassed here, he said, still speaking in that deadly quiet tone, is you. Catherine's face went pale. What are you talking about? Alexander turned to face the crowd, and when he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the garden. 10 years ago, he said, I was nobody. I was a college dropout, sleeping in my car with $17 to my name. I'd been living like that for weeks, too proud to ask for help, too ashamed to go home. The crowd was riveted. This wasn't the story they knew. The official version was that Alexander Morrison had built his empire through brilliant investments and business acumen. Nobody talked about him being homeless. One night, he continued, I was parked outside a small flower shop downtown. I was sick, hungry, and ready to give up. A young woman came out of the shop. She saw me sitting there and asked if I was okay. My heart stopped. I knew what was coming, but I couldn't believe it. I told her I was fine, Alexander said, his eyes finding mine across the crowd. But she didn't believe me. She brought me soup, a sandwich, and a cup of coffee. She gave me $20 and told me that everyone deserves a chance to get back on their feet. The memory hit me like a physical blow. 10 years ago. A young man in an old car parked outside my shop in the rain. I'd been working late preparing for a funeral the next morning. He'd looked so lost, so broken. I never forgot that kindness, Alexander continued. It gave me the strength to keep going. I used that $20 to buy my first business suit at a thrift store. I got a job the next week. Everything I've built, everything I've achieved, started with that simple act of human compassion. Catherine was staring at him in horror. You're talking about her, she whispered. I'm talking about the woman you just assaulted, Alexander said, his voice rising. The woman who saved my life. The woman who showed me that there are still good people in this world. The crowd was murmuring now, looking back and forth between Alexander and me. I was still on the ground, still trying to process what was happening. I didn't recognize her at first, Alexander continued. It's been 10 years, and I never expected to see her again. But when I heard her speak tonight, when I saw her dignity in the face of your cruelty, I knew. He walked over to me and gently helped me to my feet. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I should have stopped this before it started." "You remember?" I whispered. "Every day," he said. "You saved my life, Olivia, and I've been looking for a way to thank you ever since." Catherine was backing away now, realizing that her perfect wedding, her perfect life, was crumbling around her. "Alexander," she pleaded, "she's nobody. She's the reason I'm standing here today," he interrupted. "She's the reason I had the courage to build everything you've been so eager to inherit." What happened next shocked everyone, including me. Alexander reached into his jacket and pulled out the wedding ring he'd placed on Catherine's finger less than 2 hours earlier. "I can't do this," he said, his voice carrying across the silent garden. "I can't spend my life with someone who would treat another human being with such cruelty." Catherine's face went white. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life," he replied. "You showed me who you really are tonight, Catherine, and I don't like what I see." He handed her the ring. "This marriage is over." The crowd erupted. People were shouting, phones were being pulled out, and Catherine was standing in the middle of it all, looking like her world had just ended. Which, I suppose, it had. "You can't leave me," she said, her voice breaking. "Not for her. Not for some nobody who works in a flower shop." "That nobody," Alexander said firmly, "has more class and dignity than you'll ever have." He turned to me and his voice became gentle again. "I'm sorry this happened to you. You didn't deserve any of this." I was still trying to process everything. "I don't understand," I said. "You really remember that night?" "I remember everything," he said. "Your kindness, your smile, the way you treated me like a human being when I felt like I was nothing. I've been carrying that memory for 10 years. Catherine made one last desperate attempt. "Alexander, please think about what you're doing. Think about what you're giving up." He looked at her with something that might have been pity. "I'm not giving up anything, Catherine. I'm finally free." And with that, he walked away, leaving his new wife standing alone in her wedding dress, surrounded by 300 shocked guests and the ruins of her perfect day. The crowd began to disperse, some following Alexander, others surrounding Catherine, all of them buzzing with the scandal they'd just witnessed. I stood there, blood still trickling from my lip, trying to understand how my life had just changed forever. 6 months later, I was in my flower shop, arranging roses for a simple wedding. The shop looked different now, bigger, brighter, with a sign out front that read, "Olivia's Gardens, where every story blooms." Alexander had kept his promise to find a way to thank me. He'd become my business partner, helping me expand into 3 locations. But more than that, he'd become a friend. He stopped by that afternoon, as he did most days, to check on how things were going. "Any regrets?" I asked, as I often did. "None," he said, as he always did. "Best decision I ever made." Catherine had tried to fight the annulment, but the prenup she'd insisted on worked against her. She'd left town after the scandal broke, moving to Europe where, according to the gossip magazines, she was dating a prince who probably didn't know about her tendency to slap people. I learned something that day. I told Alexander, as we watched the sunset through the shop window, I learned that kindness isn't about what you have, it's about who you are. "And I learned," he replied, "that sometimes the most important moments in our lives happen when we're not even paying attention." We sat in comfortable silence, 2 people whose lives had been changed by a simple act of kindness and a moment of cruelty that revealed the true nature of those involved. The slap had hurt, but it had also set us both free. If this story taught you something about the power of kindness, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. What goes around really does come around. Subscribe for more incredible true stories like this one, and remember, you never know when your simple act of kindness might change everything. I'll see you in the next story. The truth is, we all have the power to be someone's turning point. We all have the choice to lift people up or tear them down. Choose kindness. Choose compassion. Choose to be the person who makes a difference. Because you never know when the person you help today might be the person who changes your life tomorrow.